Okay, we should be live in a minute.
Right?
All right, we are live. Assalamu alaikum, Mrs. Hashmi. Welcome to Kaarvan Crafts Foundation. Thank you so much for joining in today. I'm
Walaikum
immensely,
assalam. Walaikum assalam. Good evening.
although no
I
introduction can do justice to you, I feel I must let the audience know still in the humblest way possible. Salima Hashmi is a Pakistani painter, artist. She's the former college professor, anti-nuclear weapons activist, and she's also been the dean of the NCA and former caretaker minister in a previous caretaker government. She's a national icon. She has done immense work to preserve art, culture in Pakistan, and she is a national treasure. Mrs. Hashmi, thank you so much for being here with us today.
I hardly dare speak after that sort of glowing introduction. But
Nothing can
thank you
do
very
justice.
much for it. But
Mrs. Hashmi,
I don't know if I'm a national treasure, but I'm definitely a national troubleshooter. So,
well, those are
you
the
know,
best ones. Those are the best treasures we have. Mrs. Hashmi, your work in the arts spans decades. And one of the things that strikes me most is that it's always been a struggle. Why is that so?
I think that kind of creative person one is an artist, a designer, even an architect, a poet, a writer, a filmmaker, because your objective, I hope, is to alter the status quo, is to
Right.
move society forward. Therefore, it is always a struggle because you're dealing with vested interests always. You're dealing with people who say कि नहीं जी सब ठीक है,
जी
रहने दे
बिल्कुल
जिस, you know, आप गड़बड़ ना करें. मगर
बिल्कुल
creative शख्स का काम ये
या
that they have to change the world. Whether they
यस
succeed or not is a different matter. Lekin that is the passion that drives you. And I hope that that is the passion that you convey to people who come into contact with you, whether they are your students, whether they are people who you are your audience, whether it is society at large. You do want to make them see that things could be better. And of
यस
course, art is a way of doing that, making the world a better place, making life more livable.
यस
So that's a struggle.
that's the struggle. It's interesting because art within Pakistan is not just always been art for art's sake. It's always been an expression. It's always gone beyond than just being there for visual purpose. And I mean art in every form.
Yes, because we, after inherit like it's a visual sense which comes down to us through the centuries, and therefore one of the living repositories. I see it says your internet, so I will try and repeat that we are the inheritors of an
Yes,
amazing legacy, and therefore it is we should be looking for the creative spirit everywhere, not just in galleries, not just on people's drawing rooms, but moving out and going beyond. If you go to a shrine and you see the way that people are knitting the garlands that are going to go on the shrine, or if you see the way that the presentation is made at the shrine, or if you see the way in which the, the covering of the shrine is laid out, all of that conveys a certain kind of an aesthetic, a
yes,
certain kind of a, and
absolutely.
therefore I believe that we are the inheritors most ancient sensibilities in art. I mean, it
Right.
goes back thousands of years. It goes back to Meher. It goes back to the Indus Valley. It goes back to that little dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro, or the priest that had, who wears this gown. If you look very carefully at that gown, you will see that there's a trefoil design, which means that there were designers living in the time of the Indus Valley civilization.
Right.
We,
What's interesting,
which
Mr. Hasmi, is that all that you've mentioned so
tells
far,
where is the biggest.
whether what's interesting is all that you've mentioned so far, whether it's the Indus Valley civilization or the shrines or the form of clothing that we've seen, is that would it be incorrect to assume that this is untrained art? This aesthetic is part of us, that none of these were actually taught. It came about from the ground, from within the people themselves.
You see, my belief is that we look at craft as something that doesn't have a mind, that doesn't have a brain.
Yes.
It's purely to do with hands and skill. I don't believe that. I believe
Right.
that in the process of making, something magical happens. And something that somebody knows is to somebody else. So people call, oh, this is not art training. I don't believe that. Because I don't make these distinctions between art and craft, between the object made in the artist's studio, the handmade object made at the potter's wheel. These definitions came about after the Industrial Revolution, and they were very much to do with Britain. Before here, you didn't have these divisions between the fine art and the other arts and the applied arts, if you like. So for me, a very beautifully embroidered Balochi kurta was made by an artist. Only she didn't sign her
Right.
name, right?
Oh,
And
goodness.
so very difficult to decide when you're looking at a churtai and you're looking at this magnificent kurta and you're making you have a problem with that kind of an assessment, if you like.
Yes.
What is the purpose? What is the purpose of art? If it
Right.
is to make life complete, if it is to make life complete, if it is to give pleasure, if it is to make ourselves better than we are, तो फिर a Kashmiri shawl, a carpet,
Absolutely.
a very beautifully crafted piece of jewelry by a village craftsman. We
Oh,
need to open our eyes to that.
absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what's interesting is, and I speak strictly, in the context of academia here, is that
Mhm.
we've had a lot of investment in art institutes in the urban areas. There was the PNCA, the Pakistan National Council of Arts, set up by your father, Faiz Ahmed Faiz. There's the National College of Arts in Lahore. There's the Indus Valley in Karachi. And we've seen art mushroom in these urban areas in all forms. But why
Yes, many.
has that not taken place in?
Yeah, the National University, don't forget that. All of these new places, very, very vibrant. And yeah, so you can ask that. So, there's a lot of investment there, go there for 5 years, 4 years, there, spend a lot of time. So, what is that all about? That's required also. I don't see a huge contradiction there. I truly believe that in today's world, the designer and the artist have a lot to offer what is happening to the crafts in the villages. They can
Yes.
be the integrators. They can be the kind of medium in which they look at what is wonderful in the craft,
Yes.
and they can learn. Number one, they have to have humility.
Right.
They can also try that object so that it becomes of value to the citizen of the 21st century. So I believe that there has been intelligent craft, traditional crafts, that the craftsperson and the artist stroke designer learn from one another, and they
Absolutely.
create mutual consent and mutual. Because don't forget that somebody who's got a degree becomes elevated status. ठीक है
Right.
ना? Or
G.
the craftsperson is illiterate, या चार जमातें पास है या छह
Bilkul.
जमातें पास है.
Bilkul.
So there's a class difference, and there's a difference of status. So the thing we have to consider, सोचने की बात ये है कि how do you bridge that divide?
Absolutely.
I think जो चीज हमने नहीं की, we have been guilty of neglecting that aspect of the craftsperson, not realizing that it's not just enough to buy their product or to promote their product. You have to look at their economic status. You
Bilkul.
have to look at their social status. There has to be a time that the child of the craftsperson can go to the university.
Bilkul. No, you're absolutely right. I think that's a very important point that you raised, that why is class and socioeconomic status defining the future of craft?
Yeah. Well, we have to acknowledge that a very class-ridden society, huge between the rural and urban populations, even within the city. There are craftspersons who are urban craftspersons. Their status also is not what one likes, So this respect, which has to be inculcated, firstly by the artists, designers, who are being educated in these institutes, and then secondly by society at large. And that's why, I like to point out people like Adila Suleiman, who is an artist, internationally renowned artist, but she has a studio in which the urban craftsperson has a huge stake. And they work like a team. And her work carries the names of people who work with her. So I think that collaborations may be the way of the future.
Yes.
In which, institutes could invite in craftspersons and be given a status which is not depending on have they done their metric and have they done their BA and have they done their MA. It should be known as professors of practice, like has been done in neighboring countries, especially for music, because there, of course, the ustads in music are not people who've done their metric.
No.
But they're amazing ustads. So the same thing, I believe, कि अपने उस्तादों को भी अगर हम वो जगह दें, और एक मतलब बहुत सारे मॉडल्स हैं कि you have a rotating, you have a department which is in which you invite craftspersons for 5 months, 6 months. They come and they work, and they invent new things, and it can be an exciting journey, सबके लिए.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I think Kaarvan and Behbood and other organizations have tried to do. They've tried to take the craft and bring it to, the urban centers in the hope that these rural artisans, Kaarvan in particular, where we don't take money from them, we don't make money at all the profit goes to the artisan, in the hope that their work will be seen and noticed and a collaboration can take place. However, this, आप बोले?
Carry on, tell me. You have a question?
But with collaborations, there are many socio-cultural factors that come into place. It's not very easy for the rural woman to come to an urban center. She has a lot more responsibilities. घर का खाना पकाना, बच्चों का ख्याल करना, खेतों में काम करना. Do you feel that the onus then lies on the state to provide that support and to create programs where rural organizations and rural-based artisans are supported, rather than the private sector taking, the first step?
Absolutely. I think it has to be state-sponsored and not just one kind of department. In education, for example, I mean, there's a lot of talk going on right now about the national school curriculum, And I noticed that visual learning totally, in this national school curriculum, absolute visual learning is absent. And if it's a network across the country, why should schools not invite, say, if I'm in Kanakacha and there's a local craft, why should the local craftsperson not be invited into the school and teach children the local craft? It's the same with, if they're girls' schools, there, the women craftswomen would be willing to come in, and spend a couple of hours in the school if it's felt that, they are worthy and they're coming in as teachers and they're teaching the girls how to do tie and dye, or they're teaching them particular stitches, or they're teaching them how to make parandas, or they're teaching them how to make nalas, all of these things which can be taught by women in the villages to schools, to primary schools, and children can learn this very soon. And it's part of basic visual and tactile learning, hand-to-eye coordination, none of which, by the way, is mentioned in the national school curriculum. So I'm really fuming over that whole area.
It's a very important thing that you pointed out. What is the reason that schools have not adopted craft? I mean, one of the most, craft, I feel, is part of our national identity. When you go abroad and you see, let's say, Indian fabrics, for example, there's always a comparison कि हमारा काम इस तरह है, उनका काम उस तरह है. Why do you think that is there embarrassment associated with it? It can't be lack of interest. I mean, we've seen designers become millionaires on the basis of craft, for example.
Do you want it in one word? Jahiliyat. Ignorance. Ignorance. I'm afraid that our state policies have totally ignored the notion that visually we need to adopt or celebrate our identity. And this craft is one aspect of it. Yes, we have come to the stage where we are willing to say Hanji Sadikan is, very important. But we're not willing to say that woman who does block printing, in Karod Pakka, she is somebody important also. Because there's a total lack of knowledge, ignorance, jahiliyat, no idea that actually you are sitting on an amazing mound of riches. लेकिन उसके लिए मेहनत चाहिए आपको और थोड़ी सी समझ चाहिए. और yes, बहुत साल पहले जब Institute of Folk Heritage, जिसको हम लोक विरसा कहते हैं, when it was set up, this was what it was supposed to do. There were supposed to be networks like that all over Pakistan. लेकिन रात गई बात गई, that era was over. And General Ziaul Haq took saddle I mean, he couldn't care less about the arts and crafts. I mean, why
No,
should
you're
he?
right.
That was not his agenda. So we lost out on a journey that we had started.
Absolutely. Mrs. Hashmi, is this why we've seen that although the craft is something that you said that stayed in my mind, that it's passed down from generation to generation, चाहे वो गोटे का काम हो, चाहे वो फुलकारी की कढ़ाई हो, चाहे वो मुकेश के patterns हो, they are taught to females predominantly, and yet I feel that, I mean, I come from a rural background myself, and I've seen that cycle of poverty still in place. It has not changed for the next generation, no matter how many patterns they may do, no matter how many links they may make. Why is this? I mean, I find that it's heart-wrenching to know that these are the women who have kept the identity, the cultural identity of Pakistan in their hands, literally in their hands, haathon mein, and it's being passed on. But they've not, their conditions have not improved.
That's very true. There have to be incentives. And the
Right,
incentives don't always have to be economic. Yes, they have to be in economic also. They have to see that there's some advantage in innovation. They have to be inspired for innovation. They have to
right,
try out new color combinations. They need to try out even new materials that
absolutely.
will survive, that will survive a washing machine, for example, and so on and so forth. And बहुत सारी चीजें होती हैं. तो उसमें the important thing is that a great deal of research has to be conducted in various urban centers ताकि उनको पता हो कि भी इस इलाके में ये चीज़ है. This is the potential and this is what we have to do. I mean, I was pretty amazed. Not very long ago, I was in a village not very far from Bhavalpur. I had actually gone to the university, to the fine arts department, and but through them and their good offices, I went to this village. जो कि खास tie and dye का village है, और सब लोग वहाँ पे
जी,
tie and dye. And as usual, the men were sitting on their haunches, smoking their hookahs, and it was the women who were at work. But what I really liked was that they had gone to the next level. They had got their mobile and Lahore. They were interaction with, Rizwan Beg, and they were learning to, for example, some
जी,
okay,
जी, जी.
okay.
I'm
So
here. I can.
somebody had sent them, a designer had sent them a block. Okay, sorry.
नहीं नहीं आप बोले please.
Technology is confounding us.
No, no, I can hear you. Carry on.
Okay, so okay, so some designer had sent them a block printed piece and said, do something with this. So they were tie-dyeing that block printed piece, and they were arriving at some wonderful fusions. They knew about khadi, they knew about what was happening in various places, and they had these mobile phones, and they were talking, they were getting orders, they were
One.
making those pieces, and they were sending them off, by courier service to potential is and girl who done her FA or something, and they were the managers of communication,
जी.
and they were doing some amazing work. So I think the potential is there. In this case, it came from private enterprise, but I
जी.
do believe that the state, by not giving enough of their time and attention and expertise are losing out on the possibilities that are there. And it's not just about women,
Absolutely.
it's about all kinds of, all kinds of other possibilities in which the whole
Of course.
communities can pool and work together.
Yes. I mean, that's the idea, right? When you talk about equality, gender equality, you're talking about the entire community benefiting
Yes, yes,
from
yeah.
an activity that is indigenous, that is part of their everyday life.
Mhm.
Kaarvan had Pakistan's first online exhibition where the artisans were able to showcase their products through Facebook Live. And what's wonderful was some of them went on to make their own Facebook pages, their own Instagram social media pages. Do you feel that technology is the way forward for craft to be more, I suppose, commercial and open to other markets?
I think technology is a facilitator,
Yes,
um, but it mustn't take over, because the danger is of losing the quality,
right,
which is the inherent value of the
yeah,
craft process.
right,
And there's a lot of trash that's produced worldwide,
yeah,
and for the tourist business and so on and so forth, which is okay, it's fine. But one must remember that it's terribly temporary, and you can lose your importance, the importance of a certain process, certain craft, if you don't guard its quality.
of course,
So guarding and having, an understanding of quality control, and allowing the craftsperson to understand that you value good quality, because of
absolutely.
course they're in a hurry also to, to
Yes,
make
that's
money, and
that. Yes, I feel
but
that's one
but
area where Pakistan has lost out on the quality control aspect of it.
and I think that that's it, because the middleman always is the person who doesn't care about quality control. And this is a problem with craft worldwide. It's not just our problem. But I think that if they interact with academia, they will have a better sense of how to preserve quality, and what is the essence that they must never lose, for the
Right,
sake of doing something quickly. It's the essential quality which comes from the truth to the material,
right.
and truth to its founding. So I
Yes,
think that, and a lot of research needs to happen. A lot of these operations are fly by night.
that
And
documentation
sort of
being,
entrepreneur comes, they buy up stuff.
yes,
You have to guard against an entrepreneur uh, taking advantage of a community, then leaving them high and dry. So these efforts have to be sustained. Otherwise, it can be a lot of disillusion. A lot of disillusion.
yes,
So one doesn't want to lose
absolutely.
the trust of the craftsperson,
No,
because that happens. It happens everywhere. It's happened across the border. Many of us have been so disillusioned, um, by big business and how they've been misused. So uh, you have to tread carefully. You have to tread carefully and with great respect and humility.
Hashmi, would it be correct to assume that university graduates are taught all of this, especially when it comes to the arts?
Sorry, I didn't. Your voice broke up. Can you repeat
I'm
that?
saying that everything that you
I've
said
lost
with
you.
regards to quality control and the significance of craft and the need to build relationships between urban versus craft. Is this all covered in missing?
I think it's missing to a great extent.
Right.
I think the dialogues and conversations that should happen are not happening, or they're not
Yeah.
happening in a serious way. They're happening in a very superficial way, and it's just paying lip service, because
Yes.
this is a serious matter,
Of course.
and it has to be deeply researched, and it can't be something that you just take up and drop. It's not an option. Let's put it that way. It's not an optional subject, and it shouldn't be. The commitment that's required from an institution to this kind of research and work has to be a long-term commitment, which is why I value I think certain departments in Pakistan. I mean, like the textile department at Indus Valley,
Right.
I do value the commitment that they have made to design interventions in the crafts, and their students really have to go and learn from craftspersons.
Yes.
It's not dipping in, it's not a day trip to the village. Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's not that. You have to
No.
go, you have to stay, you have to live, you have to watch, you have to note down, you have to notes, you have to ask questions, you have to write it all down, you have to prepare a paper, so that some sort of a deep knowledge is exchanged and its value.
Absolutely.
It's not a superficial business.
No, absolutely. So why do you think it has not been implemented? Excuse me.
Well, it's been implemented in patches.
Right.
There are people who, I mean, their own design process has been very much a part of learning from the craftsperson. And there are specific designers who've done that. Um, I mean, I would be happier if there were artists also who took it upon themselves. Not very many have. But
Yes.
there has in the past. I mean, somebody like Shakir Ali, for example, my teacher, he was deeply devoted to the crafts,
Right.
deeply devoted, because part of his study in Prague was as an industrial designer. Very few
Okay.
people know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so his knowledge and his study of the handmade object as well as the industrial object was very profound. And
Right.
therefore, when you go into his museum, you see the thing, you see what he collected, you see, the doorknobs, you see the and what to do. So there you had an artist
Gee. Are you able to hear me? There was an internet lag, I'm afraid.
Yes, I can. Now I can. Yeah, now I can. I lost you for a minute. Technology confounds us. Sorry, I've lost you again.
That I live in, of dying out given the natural environmental crises we face. For example, if we look at fabric, fabric such as मलमल, जो अब आम तौर पे नहीं मिलती, बहुत मुश्किल से मिलती है. एक टाइम, और वो भी बहुत मुश्किल से मिलता है, लड़ के ढूंढ के शालनी के बाजारों में फिर के. Do you feel that craft will go down this route as well? Is it at risk?
I think that this is a very big issue. We are huge with textiles. But I think that it's very clear that we put all our eggs in the industry basket.
Absolutely.
And very few eggs very few eggs in the other basket. I think the development of fine quality fibers, which owe a lot to the hand, I think there are very, very few enlightened industrialists who might think that, okay, this is my payback time. This is what I have to do to save a particular craft. And it has been done in India. You know, a particular kind of sari was dying out. The Kanjivaram kind of, a particular kind was dying out. They decided that, the very fine Mapu Singh decided, okay, he asked 100 wealthy ladies to adopt a loom each. Right. And they said, this loom will produce a sari for you and only for you, and it'll be unique to you. Right. And that craftsman can spend 6 months on that loom and produce a Kanjivaram sari, which will only be for you, and you have to pay for it. And you will save the loom. Eventually, he saved 400 looms, which is amazing when the craft was totally dying out. You're not going to tell me that the wealthy industrial tycoons of textile cannot afford to save the case, cannot afford to save the malmal ki chadar, cannot afford to save the hand woven khaddar with the indigo border, which used to be a sign in the Punjab. That can be done, but you have to have an enlightened industrialist who says कि भी ठीक है, मिल अलग चीज है, लेकिन फलानी जगह मैंने 40 खड्डियां जो है ना, वो सिर्फ खेस बनाएंगी, और ऐसा खेस बनाएंगी in which the cotton is hand woven. It also is hand spun. The spinning has disappeared.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the great tragedies of the subcontinent is we lost the hand weaving technique of malmal.
Yeah. And not just malmal, it's the cotton that goes for making case. The most wonderful cases of Punjab have disappeared. We've got, industrial case, which are very charming to look at, but they're nothing like the hand woven case.
Bilkul, absolutely. Mrs. Hashmi, do you feel that it is also civil society's responsibility to source and buy fabric or support the local craft? I mean, over time, we've seen a very sort of a commercial fashion industry. जो पहले नहीं थी, जब शुरू हुई थी हमारी fashion industry, I'm talking 60s onwards से, there was a lot of emphasis on craft and finding what the local, this new country, I suppose, had on offer. And then on the basis of that, you had brands like TJ's and Generation coming out, and they were promoting a lot of craft. But over time, we've now seen things like lawn. Lawn is वो आम आदमी का कपड़ा है, it is not a luxury item, and yet it's being produced as a luxury item, and you find that traditional cloth like malmal or even gote ke kapde, mukesh ke kapde, kadhai wale kapde, shadow work वगैरह, they've taken a back seat. Do you feel that the commercialization of our clothing is also deep?
Well, I mean, that happens because people mimic the upper classes. So ये होता है, छोटे शहरों में लोग जो हैं वो बड़े शहरों वाले जैसे लोगों की तरह ड्रेस अप करना चाहते हैं. और मैं बहुत गौर से देखती हूँ कि हमारी जो मेंबर्स ऑफ पार्लियामेंट हैं या जो मिनिस्टर्स हैं, मेल एंड फीमेल, वो क्या पहनते हैं और किस किस्म की चीजें वो. And it makes me very happy when I see people, very seldom, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि हमारे से जो छोटे सूबे हैं उनके लोग जो हैं उनमें जरा ज्यादा सेंस है कि भी उन्होंने, you will find that there will be a minister जिसने लोई जो है ना वो कंधों पे डाली हुई है.
बिल्कुल.
So And I'm afraid that, the richest and largest province is also, unfortunately, nurtures a lot of bad taste,
Crass. Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, So,
Absolutely.
and I cringe when I see all those chiffons and, never mind. बहरहाल मेरी समझ में नहीं आता कि लोग जो हैं वो शिफॉन और जॉर्जेट के साथ उनको मोहब्बत क्यों इतनी ज्यादा है, मगर होगी बहरहाल. But I I genuinely
It
feel
seems
that
sophisticated dressing, Mrs. Hashmi. हम तो वैसे भी कपड़े पहनने वाले, but it's seen as sophisticated dressing.
but it makes me very happy when I see a young designer who has got 3 or 4 khaddis in their house, and they go and they find good thread and they are making, hand woven fabric, and they
जी,
have the commitment to do this. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई भी नहीं कर रहा. मेरे ख्याल में कि you do find कि अगर लोगों को मौका मिलता है तो they will do that. They will try
जी,
to do something innovative in
जी,
collaboration with the craftsperson, and they will strive to make things of beauty.
of course.
और मेरा ईमान ये है कि अगर आप खूबसूरत चीज आपको नजर आए तो आपका दिल पसीज जाता है. you know
बिल्कुल,
uh,
बिल्कुल.
a lot of people are blind where this
Yes,
business of understanding beauty goes, but in most when I'm designer, doing something जिसमें को बहुत ज्यादा पैसा नहीं है लेकिन
जी,
खूबसूरती है, तो कहती हूँ कि अच्छा भाई ये है तालीम का फायदा. ये है तालीम का फायदा. So I am willing to believe in the persistence of the younger generation, and also in their creative talent and in their ability to forge partnerships with craftspeople, which are equal partnerships in which there's mutual respect and there's mutual learning. And while that is happening, I think we can, say, no, something will survive. Not a lot, but if you can save part of it, good enough.
to preserve craft in the written form. A culture, one of Pakistan's top cultural journalists, Sonia Rahman, has just written a book in which she's documented all the craft within Pakistan. And I feel that it's a phenomenal book because she's written about the history, she's written about the technique, she's written about the cultural significance. Feel that if we document these things, it can make a difference. Would you agree with that, Spud?
Yes, definitely. Bilkul, definitely. And I feel that there are initiatives. And
Yes.
I think there's space for more initiatives of every kind. In every aspect of craft. It can go from footwear to tableware to
Yes.
household linen to a bali that you have on. It can be the color on your hand. All kinds of things that make life livable. And that's what it
Absolutely.
does. That's what it does.
That's what it does. Absolutely. Do you feel, Mrs. Hashmi, when I look at Indian craft, for example, they innovated a lot with their craft, with their fabrics. Do you feel that we've lost out because of our lack of innovation? मसलन कि उनके अब clutch bags होंगे, तो उन पे उन्होंने गोटे का काम भी किया होगा, दबके का काम भी किया होगा, and yet it's something that appeals to an international market.
Um, I think you can't. can't always hold up the Indian model because they've made a lot of mistakes also.
Right.
And
Okay.
there's a lot of trashy stuff actually, which is not worth what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
But what is good is that there have been some very serious individuals and serious cooperative movements in which, I mean, the cooperative movement saved, the craft in Lucknow, for example,
Right.
which was going through such a bad period. But it is coming together and forming cooperatives so that you save the quality of the craft and the women don't lose out to sharks. And it's the same with, the many organizations like designers who have worked with groups, but then equally there have been a very large number of carpetbaggers who have exploited craftspeople and who have produced, unspeakable vulgarities, which they passed off as, oh, this is great.
Absolutely.
But they were lucky that in their early years, they had things, they had the craft museum,
Bilkul. Bilkul.
um, and there was the handicraft movement in India.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I would say in their first 20 years, they did a lot of work. The craft museum is a great resource which you can go and study. So they've got these institutions which are unfortunately now in a very bad state. But in the
Right.
early years, they did all the research. So that repository is there for reference. So,
Absolutely.
and they have had some very great collectors. They've had some very great collectors of craft also,
Of course. Of
who,
course.
who preserved craft. So
Ab-
the enlightened craft collector is a great person because they will
Yes,
always have
you,
that. Yeah.
you're right. Mrs. Hashmi, unfortunately, our conversation is coming to an end now. So if there are anything I may have missed out, anything that you'd like to add to the conversation, I'd be grateful.
I just want to say that give the craftsperson their due and don't exploit them and
Absolutely.
give them more than they ask for. Yeah, give
Yeah,
them more than they ask for because they're worth their weight in gold.
absolutely. Thank you so very much, Mrs. Hashmi. I'm pleased we managed to get through without too many technical glitches. I apologize once again for my
Okay.
weak internet, but thank you so much.
Mine also. Okay, bye bye and good night.
Take care. Bye.